Hi, my name is Camea Peca, and we're going to start with our lunch and learn with Calming the Dragon. So basically, today is going to be an opportunity to talk about self-regulation, but also interoceptive awareness, which is kind of a new buzzword. It's actually been researched for the past 15 years, which is very exciting, but it's finally coming into public knowledge. And that's through amazing people that are doing work with somatic learning, with the ability to kind of regulate through the body, and also all of the amazing mindfulness practice that's going on right now. So I think one of the important things is thinking about how we can use the body to improve the way that we work. So a lot of the traditional therapeutic techniques, especially with trauma, have really focused on thinking. So thinking and coming from a top-down process. A lot of the interventions that we use with clients also focus on that. So they're working through kind of a CBT or a cognitive down process. And what we're looking at with interoception and somatic learning is coming from the bottom up. And that means starting with the very, very bottom of the sensory ladder. So that would be the sensations that you feel in your body and your awareness of those sensations. So the self-regulation process actually starts with awareness. So the awareness of what's happening in my body at this exact moment and how is it impacting me. So it's a different way of approaching treatment, self-care, anything that you're looking at that has to do with this. And it's based on having a safe inner base. So a lot of times when we're working with clients, we'll use all kinds of wonderful interventions and ideas and coping skills, but they don't work. And we're like, why are these not working? And we actually have to look at what's going on in the client's body. And amazing research has been done with lots of different clinical groups, including our trauma-based groups, but also depression, eating disorders, to identify that there's actually a feeling of unsafety and not being able to feel into actual body sensations. So this can kind of go two ways. A lot of our clients you'll see will dissociate. So that means they don't feel the sensations in their body at all. The other set of clients are hypersensitive. So that's where you see kind of a lot of your anxiety-based disorders. But either way, the inner base, which is needed to kind of move into all those other higher processing thinking, is completely blocked. It's unsafe. It's not safe to go into the body. The body is an unsafe place. So this idea is starting from the body instead of moving or starting from the top. So it's a bottom-up process. And this is really a historical shift psychologically. A lot of people have worked with lots of different interventions that target more of the frontal lobe. So you have to have impulse control. So this is moving back into the body first, because if the body's not regulated, we can't access the frontal lobe. So we're changing from a left brain, which is kind of a more conscious treatment cycle, to a right brain unconscious. And that means looking at the body-based processes. A lot of clients, as well as people, will describe having sensations, headaches, stomach aches, and those are all connected on the same vagus nerve that is affected by trauma, is affected by anxiety, and other things that we experience. So how can trauma be treated from the body up? So what we really are looking at here is a right-based type of treatment. And it's working with the client to start to feel their body. This might be a very scary experience for a lot of clients. But what it will do is it will create, if the body is calm, will create the ability to move up into the frontal lobe, up into the processing areas that you really need to do the emotional processing, the emotional regulation. And a lot of the research that's being done right now has found that being more interoceptively aware, it's a mouthful, actually directly impacts the ability to emotionally regulate. So having a calm body, being aware of what's going on in your body, having a good balance of what's going on in your body will allow you to then access those higher level thinking structures that we sometimes feel like we can't get to with clients and get very frustrated with in terms of treatment process. Also, this is a different approach in that you're not looking at a clinical illness. I'm not looking at depression in the client. I'm not looking at their trauma. I'm not looking at their anxiety. I'm looking at how to make their body feel calm, comfortable. A lot of times when we work with clients, we're constantly trying to calm them, but some of our clients also need energy. So it's being able to use the body for the client and be able to feel into what they need at that moment. A lot of times there's a overemphasis on what we call coping strategies or abilities to calm. But some of our clients are chronically lacking energy. They don't have that vitality. They don't have that energy, that life force that you really kind of want to be able to work with and mobilizes you into those higher level processes. So the idea of working somatically is that you can move energy levels up and down, and you can teach your clients how to do it safely. So how do you safely escalate, not explode, which may be their kind of default is to move from one extreme to the other, but to safely move in and out of body processes and emotional states. And it also really allows them control. You actually get to control something. It's not somebody else's language. It's not a professional way of working. It's an ability to control something which is the most fundamental thing to your own self, which is your body. And so that idea and that feeling of being able to control, being able to calm yourself through your breathing, being aware of when you're starting to feel sick or something doesn't feel right is an amazing way to, especially for our trauma survivors, to try and take back control over something that's been taken away from them, usually for a very long time. They're also the expert. So you're not the expert. You're actually there to invite them into their ability to feel. You're not telling them what to do. You're inviting them to experience what's safe and what feels okay for them. So it's a very different treatment structure. And I actually would revert from calling it treatment, because what I think it is a guided journey into the self. And I think that that is a different way of thinking than traditionally we want to look at. Now, clinically, this looks a little different. So I think that, everything from a somatic perspective and also from a body-based perspective is inviting them to try something, inviting them to see what something feels like. Nothing is prescribed, nothing is forced upon. So I think that that is also kind of a different shift in terms of a more structured activity. It also involves a lot of body tracking from the practitioner, from the therapist, from the clinician, because you have to be tracking where your client is, especially your clients that are dissociative, because they're not going to know where they're at. They're not going to feel what's going on in their body, but you are. You might be able to see muscle fluctuations. You might be able to see tensing. You might be able to see shifting in the seat. So initially, it's almost like being a parent with a baby. You're going to provide, when you're using a somatic-based or an interoceptive-based model, the modeling. You're going to provide the modeling of when you're talking or interacting, how you feel. You're going to track what they're doing. A lot of people have never been noticed. So this is a very interesting dynamic relationally. And it's very exciting because it's like, wow, you noticed that I'm squirming in my seat and I feel uncomfortable with you. Or, wow, you know what, actually my neck is tense right now. I didn't notice that. And so it's an ability to work with the stuff that nobody really comments on, but they're very isolated and alone with. And oftentimes we're isolated and alone with because we don't share it. So it's opening up a whole different level of relational relating as well. And I really think that one of the important things is that we have all these beautiful treatments that are coming out in terms of mindfulness and meditation, and I love them. But you have to have your frontal lobe working to use them. And so I've tried with numerous clients all these amazing, I'll get activities, I'll get exercises. I'm like, this is wonderful. I practice it on myself. I practice it with my husband. And then I'm like, wait, we have a fully functioning frontal lobe. This client doesn't. And so the ability to be able to do something that they can feel good about and will create a foundation to do that higher level thinking, the meditation, the being able to sit still. You can't sit still if your body's in chaos. So this whole idea of really starting at the bottom opens a door to all the beautiful therapy techniques that are being trialed, that are being shown to be proven amazingly effective, especially with a wide range of clients. But you have to start with the body. Otherwise, there's no ability to go into the brain to think about being still, about getting rid of these thoughts, the body has to be calm first. And the great thing about a lot of those techniques is you can pull activities from them. So you can pull little bits of the breathing techniques are awesome. That's a body-based awareness technique. But you want to be aware of where your client is or where you're at in terms of your ability to be with your body before you introduce these. Because what it can do is it can lead them to a sense of failure and disappointment. And I've unfortunately had the misfortune of introducing mindfulness activities and meditation activities to people that weren't ready for them, and seeing how that feels like a failure, but also puts them off of it as a discipline, of it as an idea. I don't use the word yoga with my clients anymore. I call it stretching, or I call it let's wake up our body, or let's move around a little bit. I always invite them into it, but I find that sometimes a lot of the language that we use that's associated with treatment, with even kind of pop culture, has different connotations. So if I say yoga to some of my clients that are living in extreme poverty, they're like, yoga, that's for hippies, so I have to remember, you have to remember who your client group is. And I think that working with the body, or saying we're going to do something with breathing or stretching, or hey, let's wake up, or hey, I notice that you're a little tired, is your neck hurting right now, is safer than using a kind of prescribed language treatment plan. So other people are very excited with the idea of yoga, because they're kind of like, oh yeah, yoga, it's around, everybody's saying it's great, I'd love to try it. But I think this again is about how we as practitioners invite people into practice and think about where they're at in terms of their own process and their own journey. So if we think about the brain structure from the bottom up, and from a bottom up perspective, what you're going to be working with when you're doing interoceptive work or somatic learning is really the reptilian brain, which is the bottom brain, which is the part of the brain that takes in all of the sensory information, the body processing, the autonomic arousal, and all of our survival functions. So a lot of times when you'll have people come into clinical practice that are complaining of headaches, lower back pain, stomach problems, they are very much stuck in a body that's in the reptilian brain mode. They are constantly battling the sensory information. The body processing is uncomfortable. A lot of times with your hypervigilant clients, you'll see that there is a sense of arousal that is also uncomfortable. I see a lot of hypervigilance in clients that have survived trauma, and these are all survival based. So the idea is that these are the functions they needed to use to survive, and their body is used to using these to survive. So the idea of going back into a safe place, a safe mode, is very, very difficult, because the body is still functioning in survival mode. And this next step up would be our mammalian brain, which is the emotions, the identification, and the processing. So if my stomach is excruciating and giving me pain, and I'm having to run to the bathroom all the time, or my lower back is in so much pain, I can't think about how I feel emotionally. What I feel emotionally is I'm in pain. It hurts. I might not even have a language for that, because we're wonderful at identifying emotional languages and building emotional vocabulary with our clients and giving them fancy words for their feelings. But when you ask a client who's been in chronic hyperarousal or chronic pain in their body how it feels, there's not even a language for most people. And when I do the full training on this, I always go back and I think about what kind of emotional language do we have, and which kind of sensory language do we have. And it's amazing, because when you look at the two pieces of paper, our language for our body and how our body feels is very limited, because we as practitioners particularly focus on giving feeling words, emotional words, giving emotional vocabulary. It's part of kind of the repertoire and the therapeutic treatment process. But there's something that comes before that. There's that ability to say that something's gut-wrenching, that something feels like stabbing you, that you also have the other end. And a lot of times the other thing that I see when I focus on this activity is that I see a lot of pain-based body process language. There's not a lot that has to do with positive emotions. One I always get is butterflies, which I think is a great one. But there's so much that goes on in our bodies that we feel, but we have no language for. So one of the first things that I like to do is once you start doing this work and you start doing some exercises, and I always say, especially with this type of work, you have to do it with yourself first. So when I started doing this work, I started doing my doctorate first on it and realized that I was impoverished in this area, that I wasn't actually actively, and I had done in the past when I did my initial training, but I hadn't actually gone back into my body for a really long time. And as I was reading about these interventions and this wonderful work that's going on and the research that they've been doing, I was like, wow, how is my relationship with my body? And I realized that through the work that we do, through the clients that we work with, through the pain and suffering that we endure, it's very easy as practitioners to numb out your own body. It's okay to feel a headache. It's okay to feel, a stomach ache. But those kind of in-between emotions, the way that we feel when a client that's a very difficult client walks in the room, the way that we feel when we have a parent that maybe, or a partner of somebody that you haven't met that you want to protect your client with, isn't always attended to. And it's not attended to in our own bodies. I noticed that as I was paying more attention to the way that my body was reacting clinically to the clients that I was working with, I was noticing that my energy levels would also peak and flow. And that with certain people, I would notice that I would notably maybe 5 minutes before they'd walk in for their session, feel very different in my own body. And that was an interesting insight. And then I thought about, you know what, hey, relationally, I'm giving out something to them and they're giving something back to me, and I'm letting theirs overcome me and hijack my system. So it's a really interesting dynamic as you start to look at how you energy-wise feed back and forth and how your body changes, how your posture changes, whether your face softens, whether you notice yourself mirroring clients, or whether you notice yourself taking control of the energy or the body processes that are going on in the room. So that's kind of the roundabout way to getting back to this idea that this is happening, this body processing, this interoceptive interchange and dynamic between people is happening all the time. And sometimes we are so unaware of how our bodies are inviting people in, pushing people away, keeping us safe, and how that plays out even at the checkout stand at the store. So I think that this is a whole journey into your own awareness as you start to embrace, if you decide to embrace this type of work, that is incredibly important, especially as you try and work with somebody else's body. You have to have a good control, understanding, ability to regulate your own body. I also think that our hypervigilant clients, they're watching. They're watching you. They're watching the way your eyes move. They're watching the way you soften your face, harden your face, tighten up. They are looking for danger. They are looking for safety. And the way that we use our bodies as clinicians is going to either open or close that door for that relational and that attachment interaction with our clients as well. And so I think that that's an additional piece to kind of think about and be aware of. And part of the whole kind of idea of working from the bottom up and working with the polyvagal nerve and these different processes that are happening that are our stress response system that extends the whole length of our body is that this social engagement. And the social engagement network is based on facial expressions. It's based on the way that we position our bodies. It's based on how we connect using our bodies before we even say a word. And so when we talk about our own bodies, this is important, but it's even more important as clinicians, as people in this field, as helpers, that we are aware of how we are working with our own bodies in relationship to our clients. And it's really interesting if you really look at some of the very kind of, I don't want to say strict, but the very protocoled somatic sensory motor therapy that Pat Ogden and other people do, it's really almost entirely based on these interactions. It is almost entirely based on the eye contact, the energy that's being exchanged, these interactions. And you can just do therapy and you can just do attachment based on that interactional process. You don't even need to get into the mammalian brain. Now, obviously, as we move through our trauma treatment, we would hope that we would start to move into the processing after the identification. But I just want everybody to be aware that you can really hone in and create relationships, attachment, regulation, just through this bottom level of interaction. So that's an interesting thing to think of. Now also you got up to the neocortex. That's our cognitive processing, that's our logic, our thinking, that's our reasoning, that's our planning ahead for our bodies, making sure that we're thinking ahead as we move into an ability to control better. So now I'm working with a client. I can control my own body. I have the emotional language. I can do the identification and the processing. I'm not even talking about them. I'm just talking about me as the clinician. And then I get up to the neocortex. And that's when I'm like, okay, I feel my energy, I feel their energy. Am I going to sit with this and explore this, or am I going to work towards a shift? And that can be an upshift or a downshift. So I think that, like I said before, a lot of our focus is on calming and downshifting, but sometimes it's okay. And it's also exciting to upshift with somebody. And a lot of times relationally, if the message, if the internal dialogue, if the internal working model is that they're out of control and they have to be controlled and the other people have to control them, the idea of safely upshifting into a relational mode that's exciting, that's not based in pain, that's not based in calming, but still has a lot of energy, is a very exciting place for our clients and also for us to be relationally and to explore with that. And I think the important thing is that whenever you're moving up or down, that you are constantly checking in, Where is this sitting in your body? Where does your body feel right now? How are you feeling? And there might not be words for that at first. It might be very simple. It might be a thumbs up or a thumbs down. It might be there is no words, they don't want to use words, you haven't developed a vocabulary for it, and you're just in that process of being with it. And the only communication needs to be enough. And I always tell people, if something is too much, if it is not feeling comfortable, if we are stepping out of your safety, it's okay. And they'll let you know when they want to go back to it, especially with upregulating. I find that, sometimes the upregulating is dysregulating. It's not controlling. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to get to a co-regulation state with that, where you can regulate with them and you can help them be in that state and feel in control. But sometimes that's too much. And that's where you have to be that external. That's where you have to be that parent. That's where you have to come in and hold the energy in the room, hold the ability to be able to be connected. So I think that I'll quickly go over, and obviously there's kind of all kinds of different trauma, but the type of trauma that I think that somatic learning and interoceptive awareness is particularly beautiful with as an alternative treatment method is our relational developmental trauma. And this is really the people that haven't had that experience of being attuned to. They haven't had that experience of being felt. They haven't had somebody resonate or mirror back. So those basic body processes that I'm a beautiful little baby and I'm going to look at my mom and I'm going to smile and coo and she's going to give it back to me, haven't been felt. It could be that those were felt, but they were sporadic. A lot of our clients that have had parents that have either been substance misusers or have been in and out of their lives or have had their own kind of mental health challenges struggle to stay in contact. It's too intense. So that ability of being felt, of being loved, of being nurtured just in the face has been absent. And we're not even talking about any of the other physical things. We're talking like the rocking, the soothing, any of the other behaviors. It's just the face. And a lot of times you'll find that those clients are the most hypervigilant to your face because they want to see if you're going to give it back. Is this my chance? Am I going to get it back? Other ones, you will get absolutely no eye contact and they don't want to look at your face. The face is a source of pain. The face is painful. It is the source of their relational pain. So the first time that you encounter a client when you're doing all your intake and your paperwork and your word and your cognitive and your neocortex stuff, also take the time to see how they position themselves in relationship with you. How much contact you get, what their face does, what their bodies do. Really spend some time paying attention to that, because I think that we have kind of nice a lot of tick boxes in terms of intakes. And, you know, was there this type of speech, or did they feel uncomfortable? Well, of course they're going to feel uncomfortable. They're with a stranger. But how does that look? How does that look relationally? Can they tolerate your eye contact? What kind of physical proximity can they tolerate? And what does that look like and feel like to you as a practitioner? Sometimes that feels rejecting. And I think that sometimes those are the clients that we really struggle to work with because it triggers our own relational rejection. And so there's such an amazing interplay that happens in the first 10 seconds of interaction with anybody, let alone somebody that you're there to be the helping professional for. Again, if this happens over and over and over again in the early years, you have a dysfunctional neuronal network. Your social engagement system is off. Social engagement system is connected to the polyvagal nerve. So you automatically are going to start a dysfunctional neuronal pattern that can either be harbored and continue, because what happens is that, what does your behavior look like? Your behavior avoids people. Your behavior is hypervigilant. So all of these things are kind of a bottom-up process of not initially being able to have had that mirroring, that social engagement, that ability to be mirrored. And the regulation is off. So the regulation is off because there's often a pattern of highs and lows. So you might occasionally get your needs met. You might occasionally be attuned to. You might occasionally be smiled at, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not consistent. So it creates also an inability to kind of emotionally regulate because you don't know what you're going to get. So you're always in that constant state of fluctuation and not knowing where things come from. And I think one of the things that we sometimes don't attend to is this sense of profound deprivation and emptiness. That human relationships, one, don't feel good. Two, they don't give you anything. And three, that there's an emptiness inside because you know you're supposed to get something from it, but you're not getting anything. And I think that that's some of the things that we sometimes overlook when we say that our clients are avoidant, or they don't want to engage, or they're hard to engage, is that there is such a profound impact on the early developmental trauma in terms of the ability to relate, in terms of the ability to hold engagement without any words, just from a body perspective, just from a facial perspective. And so this kind of briefly outlines some of the ways that the trauma can actually affect the body. So we focus a lot on kind of how trauma affects neurology and behaviors and the behaviors that you see as a result of trauma. But there's also other stuff that happens in the body that's nonverbal, that's not accessible through our memory structure. People can tell you that they feel uncomfortable with you, and they don't know why. And they may not even tell you that. You just can sense that they feel uncomfortable with you and you're not sure why. Because a lot of these memories, especially body memories, are unconscious. And they're not necessarily forgotten, but they're forgotten in terms of the ability to pull them up and to consciously be able to describe them. So the body-based memories can often immediately trigger, and we're not even talking about a dialogue, words, anything, can trigger disembodiment and disassociation. So those are feeling out of the body and disassociating with anything that's going on neuronally. And there's no chance to connect with that higher cortex of you telling them that they're safe, that this is a safe place, that this is a safe room, that you're there to help them. That's not working. You are just 100% heart's beating, pushing it down. Stomach feels sick, pushing it down. I have had clients that have come into the room and have been so scared that they've urinated themselves. That is a trauma response to fear and new people and new settings and being hurt. Being hurt, not always physically, but being hurt relationally. The idea of people coming in and leaving. And how dare you ask me to take this risk when I can't even be present with you? And it's strong and it's powerful. And it's not always attended to. A lot of time the attention is on the words, is on what the agenda is on what the treatment plan is, not on these very minute body details that you see when you first come into the room. So you see a lot of hyperarousal, which is the aggressive state of terror, and that's kind of the people that you're going to see more aggressive, overt movement. You're going to see the flailing, you're going to see the moving around a lot, that inability to sit still, the wanting to destroy your stuff in your room or kick something over. So those are you see it more in children, obviously, because their regulation system is pretty much nil, especially if they've experienced these body-based trauma symptoms. But they're the ones that'll come in and destroy your room, or will come in and break your toys, or whatever it may be that's nice in there, because their state of terror needs control. You need to control something. I need to show you that I can take control of this relationship, that you are not going to overpower me and you are not going to hurt me, which is a very interesting state. And then you get the hypoarousal, which is that frozen state. So that's the ones that come in and freeze and sometimes don't want to look at you, don't want to talk to you, complete shutdown. And there's also physiological changes. So when you look at trauma, there's physiological changes in terms of posture, in terms of the way that they hold their heads, the way that they hold their spines. You will often see a lot of collapsed posture, not wanting to engage, turning the back or the shoulder, and the inability to kind of hold the body, especially when there's fear or sadness. That inability, my body cannot hold this, I have to collapse and shut down. The other type of physiological changes you see is chest out, I am going to fight you, I am strong, my body is going to protect me. But it is also coming from a place of vulnerability. And a lot of times what's interesting is if you put biofeedback mechanisms or you put a blood pressure monitor or one of the little finger cuffs, their hearts are beating 100 miles an hour. They're scared. They're showing you what they know how to show you to keep their body safe, but inside their body is scared. So it's a very interesting kind of paradox of the way that the body can be used to protect in two different ways, either to shut down and close off or to puff out and protect in a different way. You also notice that there is certain stuff that goes on in the eyes. So again, this is kind of relating back to the social engagement system. So there's small muscles in the eyes that go through hyper and hypoarousal loops. So that might be some type of like twitching that you might see in the eyes, kind of gaze going up and down, different things that are happening, or freezing in the eyes. So you will see eyes that are very, very tense. You also will notice pupil change. So I don't have this on here, but you will notice that there's pupil dilation and pupil constriction. And they will hide. They will hide this so well. They're so good at hiding this. So I am not angry at all. And the eyes are dilated almost completely where I cannot see any of the color. And it's just really interesting. Hey, let's put you on the heart rate monitor. And then you're like, oh. But it's also interesting because they've never been tracked in their eyes. So when I say somebody's eyes are dilated, And again, this is a very fine line because you don't want to ever go into shame response. And I only do this higher level tracking with clients I've already developed a relationship with. But wow, your eyes are down. And I'll get a mirror and I'll show them and they'll be like, wow. And it's also an amazing opportunity at that point. Hey, do you want to do something with us? You want to work with us together? And they might say no. And they might say, sure. And that's an opportunity for you to bring in your interoceptive awareness piece, your body-based piece, your somatic intervention, your yoga, whatever you might use and you choose as the piece that you want to incorporate into your practice, and then to show them again in the mirror. Because what they want to see is results. If they're going to buy in to your breathing or your yoga or whatever it might be that you're trying to sell them, and a lot of these people have already been to multiple therapists, multiple treatment centers, multiple interventions, multiple groups, and you're bringing something a little bit different, you got to show them it works. And showing them it works might be, if you have somebody that has a lot of pupil constriction and dilation, might be something like that. Might be using a mirror with an intervention before and after. It might be using a heart rate variability monitor. It might be using a little biofeedback mechanism. And it might just be simple tracking, showing them that they can control whether their heart goes up and down. A lot of other times that you'll also see small muscles in the ears. And you can't obviously see the small muscles in the ears, but there's ear constriction, there's stuff that goes on in the ears. So a lot of times, and a lot of the work that Stephen Porges is doing is starting to work with using sound, using a more sound-based therapy, which is also a body-based intervention. So it is a somatic intervention. Using sound is somatic. You're working directly through the ear canal with the nerves. So when you look at something like this in terms of using the small muscles in the ears, you would be looking at how you use arousal and modulate arousal up and down through sound. So sound is an interesting one. I think it's something that is touched on in some of the somatic-based learning texts and different things, but it's not always explored to a great extent without great equipment. But it can be used really simply. On YouTube, there's hundreds of videos with theta waves. There's hundreds of videos with calming sounds. You have to try them first. But once you find one that you like, being able to use that as a tool, it's a tool that they can take away from them. It's a tool that any place where there's internet or Wi-Fi, they can pop on headphones and they can use, especially if you have somebody that has a phone. But even not, you can record it for them. It's something that they can take away, that can be something that they can use when and where they want to. So there's a great video, which is, I think, called The World's Most Calming Song. 7 minutes long. Yeah. And I don't know, have you listened to it?
I think, yes, it rings a big bell.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember who it's by. But if you put it on YouTube, it'll come up. And it's 7 minutes long, and there's like a 2-hour version. I can't sit through the 2-hour version. But the 7-minute version is amazing. And you want to play it loud. At least for yourself the first time, if you're good with sound and you can tolerate sound. Because the vibration that comes through it from the theta waves and the waves that are going in and out is intense. And I'm thinking about it right now, it's giving my body chills. So, I mean, when I think about the way that sound can be used without having words, without having to feel uncomfortable, if you have a client that can't hold eye contact, don't till you're ready. Don't till you build a relationship where they can have that. But you can bring in other sensory interventions. And one of them is sound. So sound is a beautiful one to use. The Tibetan singing bowls, I don't know if anybody's had experienced those. They're beautiful. They're really amazing. And they vibrate and they go right into, and when I describe this, they go into your core. And when we talk about the vagus nerve in the spine, you can feel them shoot up the back of your spine and vibrate. And that feeling of connection with something outside of your body when you have not felt anything outside of your body for years, decades, ever, is a good starting point. And it's a safe starting point. And they might tell you to turn it off. You can turn it off, no problem. They might tell you to turn it louder. You don't know. But unless you start taking some of these risks to start to build connection with the outside world, it won't happen. So sound is a beautiful one. There is a full protocol that Stephen Porges has online. It's called Safe and Sound. It does have some equipment that goes with it that can be rented. But if you are running groups or you are looking to kind of use more sound-based therapy, they've used it a lot with regulation for clients that are on the spectrum. And being able to kind of, I don't want to say sensory integration processing disorder per se, but people that have struggled with that ability to take in sensory information. It's too much. It's a way to kind of slowly introduce that. But the cool thing is that it also is on the same wavelengths to calm the vagus nerve. So it will do that body-based piece first, which is amazing. So I would encourage anybody, if you do nothing else from today, go and play with some sound stuff. Go on YouTube, play with sound. Find something that allows your body to come up and come down. That is the beauty of music, and it doesn't require a relationship. So it's something that you can start with at an early intervention, at something that's not too intense. Obviously, if you have sound sensitivity, you have to think about that, but every client's different. But just kind of an idea with that. A lot of times you have lungs, heart, gut stuck in a fixed trauma response pattern. So you'll see this probably before they'll feel it. I was making slime yesterday with a client, and I could tell that he was enjoying it, but he was holding his breath the whole time, and he was sweating. And this is a client who was we've been working together for I think almost 3 years, just started to feel his body. For years, he didn't feel anything in his body. And one day we were walking together, and I looked over at him, and I noticed his face was different. And I said, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "My legs hurt." And it was the first time I had heard this almost teenager now say to me that he felt something in his body. So I was super excited, and I was like, "Oh, let's take care of it." And we got him to the podiatrist and did all these other pieces. But he was playing with the slime, and he was squeezing it, and he was doing it, and I could tell he was holding onto his breath. And I asked him how he felt about the experience. What did it feel like? What does it feel like right now as you're doing that? And he's like, satisfying. And I was like, wow. So we talk about like sensory manipulation and feeling control and creation through something as simple as making slime. But I said, you know what? It's okay to breathe. You can breathe while you're doing it. And he smiled, and he kind of like relaxed a little bit. And then he sat and played with it. He's like, can we make more? And I said, yeah, we can. But that whole experience of being witnessed is what elevated that piece to the next level. So there's a lot of somatic-based learning and interoceptive tools that you can use by yourself, and I think that they're wonderful. But there's also these pieces that you can elevate to the next level through the relationship, through the social engagement, through the tracking. Hey, I can tell that this kid's really loving this, but he's loving it so much he doesn't want to lose it, and he's holding onto his breath and holding onto his face like it's going to be taken away from him. And I did it first, because whenever I introduce anything that's breathing or relaxation, I will over dramatize it, especially with my kids' clients, because they love that. And they love that, and it's fun, and it breaks the ice, and it makes me look goofy first. I also do this with adults, grown-ups, because we all have our internal scripts and our internal dialogues of telling us that I don't want to do that. I'll look stupid. What if I make a funny sound when I do that? So I think that as somebody using somatic learning, interoceptive awareness, body-based processes, you really have to feel comfortable doing it, because nobody's going to do it without you doing it first. You have to break the ice. You have to do it first. You have to do the because if you try and first of all, if you try and describe that in words to somebody, I don't know, how do you describe that? There's not really words for that. But if you describe how it feels as you do it, or when you're done with it, oh wow, my arms feel looser, my shoulder feels looser. I feel like everything's left. One develops a language for it. So like we like to model emotional vocabulary. This is actually giving a body vocabulary. And two, it allows them freedom to be able to play. And I think that when you're working with the body, you are going back to a state of play, experimentation, play. What does something feel like? It's not about thinking. It's not about, let me come up with what I think that they're supposed to say. Sometimes I will do activities and people don't like them. And I'm like, that's cool. You don't have to. There's stuff that I don't like. And I might show them one that I don't like if I'm doing like a yoga pose. I might say, you know what, this one makes me feel really uncomfortable. And they'll be like, oh, good. It's not just me. So I think that, a lot of the process is a co-process, but it's also your leading is not leading in terms of telling people how they should feel, what they should think. It's leading in terms of, let's do this together and let me feed back where I'm at. And this requires a great level of bravery from you as the practitioner because you're putting yourself out there. So if you're not cool with it, they're not going to be cool with it. But you have to actually put yourself out as a practitioner to say, I'm willing to go there with you and I'm going to keep you safe and we're going to be okay. But you have to do that through your face, through your body, through your modeling, opposed to just giving words. I think that one of the interesting parts of this is how a lot of practitioners that work with this kind of work break some of the rules around feeding back how they're feeling. That's a choice that you'll have to make. I would always advise watching the work of kind of Peter Levine, Pat Ogden, these other people that are using these techniques regularly. Watch some of their client sessions because it's very interesting to see the way that this goes down with clients. And I say watch some of their client sessions, but I also be aware of a lot of the times that these clients they've been working with for a really long time, so they're not going to look exactly like the people that come into your office for the first session. But I think be aware of how somebody makes you feel. And once you've developed a good enough relationship where that's not going to break your relationship, let them know. My heart just dropped when you said that. You gave me chills when I saw you stretch up so high and reach so high. It was almost like you were going to touch the stars. It was beautiful. And I think it's okay to be real with the body. Sometimes it's hard to be real in terms of our own feedback, but I can say, oh, we're doing something with our neck or we're doing something, and I can say, that hurts. That hurts me. How does it feel in you? And you're not taking away their therapy. You're not taking away their session. You're not taking something away. You're actually giving something. You're giving the experience of being in a body relationship with somebody else. And I think that that's a really beautiful and exciting piece that a lot of people have never, ever experienced, even as adults, with good upbringings and everything that has gone right. So I think that this is a really important piece. And I think that the other piece is really thinking about how their body feels on a weekly basis. So checking in. How's your stomach today? How's your head today? How's your body? You can do a full body scan. A lot of these things can also be incorporated in as kind of rituals for the way that you structure your sessions or your groups. So you might start with a body scan. You might start with a stretching or a down regulating or an up regulating, depending on where your group's at. You might stop the middle of a group and say, you know what, hey, our energy's low. Let's do something. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I would invite you to come with me to up this, because I feel like we're low. But you are holding that. You are holding that as the person that has control over it. And they are holding whether they want to do it or not. And also they are holding how they control it because it's their body. So these are both really interesting kind of pieces as you move forward. I'm just going to do it. Okay, we're good on time. So there's lots of links between the way that the body functions and trying to fill voids, emptiness. A lot of this will be through, a lot of times with sexualized trauma, you see there's a lot of studies that have proven higher level of obesity. You'll also see eating disorders, which is the flip side. But these are both conflictual relationships with the body. They are a need to keep filling the body and not be able to feel. I've seen people, I have to ration snacks, and I always have snacks and water in my office because I think it's really important that you attend to your physiological needs before you are like trying to engage with anything that has to do with relationships or anything else. So I always have it available. I always invite my clients, hey, here's where the bathroom is, this is the setup, get water, get drinks. You need to leave during the session. It's totally cool. And I also model that. So if I'm thirsty, I'm going to take a drink of water. And I model that for them to open up that door. But I have also been aware of the fact that sometimes you have to control that too for them because they've never been co-regulated in terms of overconsumption. And that's a scary thing. I've noticed people that are so parched, their lips are dried up. Nobody's ever co-regulated or noticed the fact that they need water. They don't notice that their body needs water and they're having headaches and they're dehydrated. So a lot of these are these simple looking after pieces that they've never done for their body. They have never looked after the body. They've never noticed. And so, just noticing these pieces, noticing their body, noticing when they come up in with a smile, is a really, really powerful piece. And when we talk about body work, there's all kinds of fabulous interventions, but there's also this subtle noticing. And that's the exciting piece that, that you really sometimes gets lost. I remember when I was doing my training in London, they do a whole piece when you're doing your child training where you go and observe in nurseries and you go and observe a mother-infant interaction and you go and observe in a preschool too. And so you're not having any dialogue, you are just observing body language, eye contact, attunement, mirroring between 3 different developmental age groups, which are probably the most vital in terms of the foundation of lifetime development, and thinking about what does it feel like when everybody runs away from you on the playground? How does that impact the way your body feels? And that's the piece that we do with our neocortex as the thinkers that are being in relationship and working with this client. How do I make that child not a monster, their body not a monster? How do I change that dynamic? How do I allow them to take on a softness? And that's an interesting piece. How do I give somebody the eye contact that they never received from their mother? It's a very difficult piece, but it also really brings us back into the realm of attachment. And I think that as you move forward, and if you decide to do more with interoceptive awareness or attend more of the training that we do here, you'll notice that there is a beautiful link with all of the relational and neurobiological attachment work that's being done in the field too, because these are so interconnected. And that's really exciting. So if we look at complex trauma from a body-based perspective, you're really looking at body-based symptomology. So this might require a whole different intake, depending on whether you feel like this is where you want to start with your treatment. It could be that you work on relationship building with your clients and then you go back and you do the body-based piece. I like to start with the body-based piece first, but it just depends on how you work. But this is kind of how do I track body-based symptoms? There's some beautiful tools out there. There's the Body Perception Questionnaire, which is Stephen Porges's tool, and it's free. And they're working on a child version. I contacted him when I was starting my doctoral research, and so they're working on a child version of that, which is exciting, and hopefully that will be out soon. But it's a free tool. So I would recommend that as practitioners, we always do the good practice of tracking, and whether that's using a mirror to track eye dilation, or using a heart rate monitor, or one of the little finger pulsometers to track that way and to show them that they can control their bodies, or using a more standard measurement, especially if you're working in a project that likes those kind of things. That one's a good one. And then there's the multi-dimensional assessment of interoceptive awareness. It's MAIA. And that is also free online. So that is another tool, and that one has been trialed in all over the world with lots of different client groups. It's an adult-based measure, so just be aware that that's not something you can use with kiddos. And it's also, it kind of touches into some of the regulatory processes too. So if you want to get a gauge of, where they're at with not only their awareness of what's going on with their body, but also how they regulate the body-based symptomology, it has subscales for that, which is a really nice tool to use. There's also the heart rate variability task, which is what you will see if you look in, the academic research in terms of Google, and there's apps for that. So you can do heart rate variability on your phone, which is pretty cool. Some of them will allow you to just do it with your finger. So you actually put your finger on your camera and it tracks your pulse. There's other ones that will actually track your clients through their whole journey process with you, or that they can get on their phones and they can do a daily check-in. And what's cool is it will actually feed back to them fluctuations. So if you're trying to work on patterns, understanding when somebody's getting migraines, understanding when they're having these stomach problems, or just getting them to be aware of how their body fluctuates through a week, through a day, this tool will allow all that information, and it does really nice like data readouts. So they can see kind of what parts of the day after they're checking in. And you can set reminders, hey, check your heart rate variability. And the heart rate variability is just, it's a measure of balance between the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous system. So we'll show you kind of if you're off kilt. So those are some really nice tools to use that are, well, the apps, I think you have to pay a little bit, but the other ones are free. So kind of a way to start using them. And I would also recommend with those that you do them with yourself. Try it. See where you're at. Because I think that that's an interesting starting point for your own practice. And again, like I said, this is all about doing this experientially, starting this piece with yourself, creating a practice of interoceptive awareness and interoceptive care with yourself before you move this into clients. And I think that that's one of the really important things to keep in mind. So when they talk about when disembodiment goes on for a really, really long time, it shuts off. And I think I described that client that I had. I've had more than one client like that. I've probably had 20, 30 clients that do not feel things in their body. These are also people that, especially with children, where you'll see a lot of wedding accidents, other stuff that happens with their body because they can't even feel it. And we're like, they're doing it on purpose, or, they drink too much. They can't feel what's going on in their body. They have shut off the body. The body has closed up shop. They know that they need to eat. They know that when they're a good place and the frontal lobe's on board, they need to go to the bathroom. But the body is done with connecting to these higher level functions, this emotional base, these other things like that. And these primitive emotions, the lashing out, the rage, the other things, can be held in the body through these disruptive neuronal patterns. So they can become disruptive physical symptoms. Those are some of the physical symptoms that you see that are, clenching, a lot of like stuff that's holding on, restrictive. The shallow breathing. I always track kind of where somebody's breathing is. Like, are they a deep breather? Are they a shallow breather? Are they breathing at all? I mean, obviously they're kind of breathing because they're alive, but it's interesting. You would be surprised how many people will sit through half a session, a whole group, and they're not breathing normal. They'll breathe a little bit just to let that little bit of air in to keep going, but they're not breathing. And the breathing is one of those hard things because at first, when you tell somebody to pay attention to their breath, they'll do it, but it's like, I know how to breathe. Like, why especially with kids, I know how to breathe. Obviously, I'm breathing. And you're like, okay. And that's where you have to be like the experimenter, the scientist, and say, hey, you know what? Let's bring in the play. Let's do an experiment. Pop on the little thing, the pulsometer. Let's see how it feels, or let's see if it changes when we do 5 deep breaths, when we do countdown breathing. And there's all kinds of short breathing activities. Again, breathing activities, any of these activities, you can Google somatic learning activities. When we do the full training here, I go through a whole range of different activities that you can do that target these different things. And I always, the second half of the training, the full day training, is actually doing the activities. So that's all we do, is do all the activities, because I think it's so important that you do this experiential piece on this. And a lot of these people are substance users, the people that are constantly using substances to numb, to not feel, or to feel. So again, when you talk about this up and down regulation structure, the people that can't feel anything are using uppers. They want to feel. They want to feel something. Those are the people that are behaviorally acting out to be able to get that sensation. You've got the other people that do not want to feel anything. And occasionally they might feel something. And that is so overwhelming and so scary that they have to do something to get rid of that. That might be behaviorally getting rid of something, or that might be substance-wise getting rid of something. So when you look at this inability to kind of come up and down, it is very much correlated to where that person is. And that's why it's so important to find out where this person's at with their body. Are they an upper? Are they a downer? Can they do middle space? Is middle space possible? Where do they do middle space? You might find people that feel like they do middle space at work, but come home with terrible headaches. Come home every night and drink a lot. Because they think that they're holding it together all day, but their body is in a constant state of fluctuation. And then they're trying to get to that middle space, or numb out, or to not feel. So that's kind of a really interesting continuum. And I think that, you know, there isn't like a kind of intake tool per se. But I think if you go and look at those other tools and you use those as kind of a side-by-side intake tool, or a pre and post measure, depending on whether you're talking about designing a group or an activity, they work really well. And all of the body-based and somatic interventions can be done on a one-to-one basis, but they can be done in a group. You have to be aware of the level of safety in your group. So I think that that's something to be aware of, and how you approach it. You can do these pieces as just straight one piece after another, and you can do them as interventions. But if you're going to do that more intentional processing piece, if you're at that middle brain or that higher brain, be aware of how the safety is in order to be able to move into those pieces. And you might find that as a natural progression, by doing this piece of work, by doing this type of work, that you actually see people just move into middle space, and they say, my jaw's tight. I was mad. And you're like, And so it's interesting because you'll see a natural progression, because once you've done the work to release the jaw, and the jaw's not hurting anymore, and the body's relaxed, you're like, I wonder why your jaw is hurting. I had a really terrible day. And I had to hold, and this is an interesting thing. I love working with metaphors, so I'm going to throw this out here. I had to hold my mouth from not saying what I wanted to say to my boss, or not cussing out my teacher, or whatever it may be. But when we talk about a lot of the metaphors we use just in the English language are body-based metaphors, but we don't take care of the body. So when we say something's gut-wrenching, it's interesting. And you can play around. I mean, you can, what's cool about this is you can just really expand it. And depending on how you work kind of in your own practice or what you do, you can take those metaphors, you can pick them apart, you can throw them out there. You can say, what do you think it means to have something that's gut-wrenching? And they might be, I don't know. Have you ever felt really sad? And I love the common ones because they're the first ones that usually most people can grasp, is that pit in your stomach, that heart dropping, the butterflies. So find some ones that you think are like common ones and play around with those first, because sometimes people will not realize, especially kids or teenagers or people that are profoundly traumatized, that other people feel this, that other people have felt that feeling that they felt when they heard their drunk father come in the door and the handle turn. And that just gave me chills too. But they have thought that feeling of freezing, that feeling of butterflies, that feeling of gut wrenching, that drop, that lump in their throat is something that they just experience, that nobody else has ever felt that. And it's amazing because you'll see the body posture shift because they're like, you felt that too? And you're like, yeah. And it's a really interesting way to make their trauma and their pain more universal. That, hey, this is what our body does. And you can feed in all the beautiful neurological research into this too. And hey, this is the brain, and the brain does this as a fear response, and it's preparing you for this. And I do feed that in because I think it's important that they understand how their brain and body work together, and also how they battle each other. And then how this other piece of emotion comes in. But I think it's a beautiful piece to connect the pieces. Hey, you want to know something really cool? You can control this. You want to know how? Let's play around with it. And so I think that that whole exploration, starting with a common language, starting with words for experiences, starting with feeling like you're not alone, is an amazing starting piece. And I think the beauty is that this can be weaved into any practice. It can be weaved in as a check-in. It can be weaved in as an exit activity to re-regulate and ground before leaving a group. It can be used as a way to connect group members. It is a way to build a relationship. It is a way to rebuild attachment. So it can be really woven into any practice without, I would say, fundamentally offending most therapeutic rules. Again, the self-disclosure is something that you have to play around with and think about, how comfortable you feel with that. But I like it. And I think that, for somebody that hasn't felt something, to, one, admit that they feel it, but two, to realize that other people feel it and that they can be witnessed in feeling it is pretty cool. And it's pretty amazing to show that actually there's a relationship. There is relationships in the world between the way that we feel in our bodies, even though we might not have had the same experiences, even though we may not have felt the same emotions, that we are all interconnected through our bodies because all of our bodies do similar things. So I think we've got just about a minute or so left. We're going to be doing another round of the full interoceptive awareness training where, like I said, the first half is kind of going through more of the theoretical, and then the second half is going to be doing the actual interventions. So trying things on for size, seeing what you like, seeing what you don't like. I really think that this is an individualistic thing, but you are going to find that there was something that you didn't really like, but you get a client and you're like, that's going to be perfect for them. So I like to play around with as much as possible when you get an opportunity to do that. And then we're also hoping to do a kind of sensory motor 2-day training, which is just going to target loads and loads of interventions that really target the sensory system. So that will be looking at all of the sensory system. So that's very exciting, and I really encourage everybody to continue to explore. Use YouTube. There's beautiful stuff from all the people that are pioneering this work that's free right now. And that's what's exciting about when a new kind of field emerges, is that there's loads of wonderful free resources. There's also like a very expensive training in it too, if you really love it and you really want to get in that depth, that Peter Levine offers and Pat Ogden and some other kind of trainers offer. So thank you so much for joining me, and have a great day.